to open that up. Be careful you do not spill it on yourself. The same way also, he says in verse 25, the same way also he took the cup after supper, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me." For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. In the church, we recognize that we have communion, which is a picture of Jesus' broken body, the blood that he had to shed for us. The second one is one that we celebrate, and that is baptism, also the picture of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus. We go. We have these two simple ordinances and a proclamation of what Jesus has done for us. Let's pray. God, as we sit here, as we pray to you as a body, Jesus, we thank you for your willingness, your obedience to the Father to come to earth, live among us, be willing to be falsely accused, falsely brought to trial, falsely murdered by people you came to save. But Jesus, as you gave over your power and authority for a time being to humanity, to allow them to kill you, because you were never really out of control. You were never really lost who you were. Because 3 days later, you proved and you demonstrated the power of God by rising again. So we here today proclaim and celebrate, thank you, Jesus, for your power over death and over sin, and how in you we have freedom. Thank you, Jesus. We are in Luke chapter 14 today. Luke chapter 14. We have a few announcements. Some of you saw coming in. We're setting up a chest and we're starting to get diapers together. We have preemies, newborns, and size 1 for diapers. And I had to ask, maybe some of you had this question, but I asked Nicole, hey, are we gonna like buy too much? Is this, or is there gonna be a lot of leftovers? You know, I'm trying to think through, like, how do you, because in at Dry Types we discourage a lot of newborn diapers because babies grow out of it a little fast. It's like, hey, we're home, we're eating, and boom, they're adults. So I was trying to figure out, well, these, just a heads up, they are a lot teenier than normal babies. Teeny little things. And secondly, there's 2 of them. So I think that's the big thing. It's 1, yeah, okay, fine. There's 2 of these little things. There are 2 eating, drinking, pooping baby machines going there. And yes, Nikki, you're messing.
Well, I want to also emphasize they're in micro preemie diapers right
Yes.
now, which are literally this big. Like, there is this thing that can move.
You have one, a micro preemie one? You're here, Terry. I didn't see you.
Oh my goodness.
Show. That's
Oh,
one
they're
thing right now.
tiny.
I'm gonna go see it. I don't think I've ever. Yeah, they're not even into preemies yet. So what I'm saying is, if you're like, oh, I don't know what I should get, it'll be okay. So look at this thing. Look at this. You can seriously. Look at this. I'm literally wearing it. If that doesn't put it, okay. That doesn't put a good image on how teeny they are. Wow. Thank you for letting me use this. That's nuts. You can get a picture of it. That's tiny. I was wearing a diaper during church. There it is. That's it. So, first time for everything. Yeah, that's it'll never happen again. Unless I'm 70, and then I will need them. Okay.
Do you feel better about my analysis now?
I could, but I wanted to drive home the fact that, hey, they need diapers, and they're teeny. And you might be like, I don't know. I mean, because for like dry tykes and wet wipes, we don't give out preemies. We give out newborns. And even then we discourage the newborns because after 2 weeks they're out of it. They're just flat out. This is not a normal situation. So if you can really help, I don't know if you guys have walked down the aisle of diapers. They can be sort of pricey. And like I said, these babies are pooping machines, so they need them. And so it would be a huge help to Terry, somebody in our church family, if you can grab a set of diapers, grab a few sets, maybe grab one of each. If there's other options, if you're like, I just don't know, and maybe I want to save up for maybe them later, maybe grabbing a gift like a gift card or something like that would be acceptable too. I don't think she'd say no. So just find ways of helping her out and get some diapers. That'd be a huge thing. Yes.
If for some reason they would like to leave a donation rather,
Yeah.
they just take it out to diapers and I will make sure somebody will have to buy the diapers.
Okay, yeah, so if you don't want to lug one of those monster boxes around, that'd be great. So that's a good thing, right? Write a check, put diapers on it, and we'll
Just the day matter. I think we got a pretty yesterday for $5.
that's one little pack. Okay, how many diapers are in that thing? Okay. Yeah. So, but that's it. So there's a lot of different options. Let's help Terry out, and we're be doing that here for a while. Also, we have the church summer picnic thing, potluck, farewell, cry fest on Sunday, August the 1st. There's a sign-up sheet out there for some good food, and then the church janitorial work. We need still some help. You can sign up to help, vacuum the auditorium, make sure the bathrooms are straightened up. It won't take you that long, but we need some sign up there. So there's some things out there. Other than that, we are going to jump right into our parable here today. I still don't think our clicker is working. So if you could advance the slide for me, Arlene. I'm going to jump right in, but we're in Luke chapter 14. No creative way of introducing this, and so we're just going to jump right in. But we're in verse 25. Luke says, now great crowds were accompanying him, Jesus, and he turned and said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Wait, what? Could you imagine being a devoted follower of Jesus? You're part of the crowd. You know there's issues with the crowd. here Jesus just turns and says, if you want to follow me, you gotta hate your brother, sister, wife, kids, even yourself. I got a question. I think I remember you saying, Jesus, and I mean, they didn't have Luke 6, but but like Luke 6:27, I say to you, you who hear, love your enemies and do good to those who hate you. How can I do both? And I think I also remember. I'll just hold on to that question because Jesus isn't done. Because he then says in verse 27, whoever does not bear his own cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. Jesus, I got another question. Carrying a cross is hard work. And I'm pretty sure you said somewhere else, like Matthew 11:30, or my yoke is easy and my burden is light. How? What? I mean, how does that work together? I mean, doesn't that confuse your message a little bit, Jesus? I mean, you try to get us to love others. Now you want us to hate them. And ourselves. And our wife. And our kids. And my mom and dad. And this shock here shows get our wheels spinning. I mean, and I have heard in many Christian circles, this last verse is a huge favorite of certain groups of people to add the entire legal expectations of the law back onto Christians. You can hear a lot. You gotta carry your cross. You gotta do it. Yeah, but he also said hate a whole bunch of people. Carry your cross. But he said hate. Do it. Carry it. And because he flip-flops things here so dramatic on the crowds, and because Luke takes this in light of everything else Jesus has said before, I think the purpose of this is to literally get us to punch the brakes, to stop hard, and really think about what Jesus is about to say next. Its purpose for the crowds listening was to get them to stop and begin to wrestle through exactly what Jesus is trying to say. Those questions that I brought up about what you also said to love, how can I hate? You said your burden is light, but you're asking us to carry our cross. How does this work together? What is Jesus trying to communicate here? And this is where Jesus begins to set up another parable, where Luke has it recorded. Now, kids, I'm going to ask you a quiz question, because I don't know if the adults will know it. So can someone tell me what a parable is? Uh-oh. to understand story, the deeper spiritual meaning. Bonus points to my eldest daughter. An easy to understand story with a deeper spiritual meaning. So here we are now in Luke, and we're all discombobulated now because he has literally taken everything he has said, turned it upside down, and he's making it look like hating is the way to go to be a follower of Jesus. And then we're presented with this parable. For which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether he has enough money, to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, "This man began to build and was not able to finish." Back in the late 1800s, if you could advance the slide for me, back in the late 1800s, there was a king of Bavaria, which is now part of southern Germany, by the name of King Ludwig. This king invested his own personal finances to build himself the castle, which, if you're honest, inspired the Disney castles. This is hands down my favorite castle, and I know I've shared in the past. Like, if I had one thing on my bucket list, that was pretty much it, and I got to go inside it. And oh man, that was awesome. But what's funny is he started building this castle that he didn't want anyone to visit because it was just going to be his castle. And he was also building a few other castles in the process. And because people think he was going a little wookie in the head, he started off with a plan to build this castle, the Neuschwanstein's castle, and he started running out of money. But that didn't stop him. So he tried to get creditors, and he tried to get people to finance this thing, because he was a king after all. And he kept trying, he kept changing, and kept changing, kept changing, kept changing the plans. And so they were repeatedly, these poor engineers, could you imagine? I know you just built this wall, but we think we got to build another one. Wait, what? The poor engineer who has 92 copies of the castle now has a new one. I mean, he's getting paid, but at the same time, he's like, hey, where's the money going? And he ends up going bankrupt. Now, I know a lot of statements have been said, oh, he bankrupted the company, and that's why Bavaria gets sucked up into Germany. Well, that's not right. He just bankrupted himself because he actually then tried to go, by recommendation of another king, tried to go to his country and said, hey, so I really want to build these castles for myself, but I run out of money. Can I borrow the country's money instead? And the country's like, no. And we're also going to kick you out being king. Because you're nuts, man. And so he wasn't able to be king. And then he died, and he wasn't even able to live in his castle. You want to think of a story of a guy desiring to build a tower. He didn't really count the cost, because he kept redoing it. And now we look at it and we're like, that's an awesome castle. Because the country then promptly, after he died, opened it up to the public to get more money so they could actually finish the thing. But now we know King Ludwig. He built the castle. The castle is great. At the same time, he's a mockery for what he's done. It was insanity. He began to build and was not able to finish. And the parable there is count the cost before it bankrupts you. But Jesus continues there in verse 31. Or what king, going out to another king in war, will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 men to meet him who comes after him with 20,000. And if not, while the other is yet a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. If you could advance that slide again. 1940 World War II France had been overwhelmed by the Nazi powers, and the government of France was debating on what to do next. And so, some of you history buffs, there's the United Kingdom and England. The U.S. is way over here. There's Germany. Germany went into Belgium, down, and completely cut off France, the French army here, and had shoved the British and was running them into Dunkirk. I know some of you might have seen that movie by Christopher Nolan here, I don't know, about 6 years ago. I never actually saw it. I need to, but never saw it. They ran to Dunkirk where the British ran away and was able to make it to the United Kingdom and able to fight back later. Well, in the process, they went through and swept down, they went and conquered, they completely cut off the French forces, and the French had to surrender. So now the government doesn't know what to do. Do we try and keep fighting? Knowing full well if we keep fighting, Germany is going to keep going through. And when they went through, they were terrorizing and destroying, and it was just going to be chaos. And so they were trying to count the cost. Was it worth it to keep fighting on behalf of the people? And the government at that time said no, and so they came up with this puppet regime, Vichy France, based right there. I think it's like a city for spas or something. So it's pretty much like a resort town with their capital. And they became Vichy France. And Germany allowed them to do it in order to get the Navy and cut off any resistance from the French. And there it was. So this nation, for good or bad, counted the cost, whether it was really worth fighting the Nazi powers at that time, and they had decided, no, we are unable to. They sued for peace. See, and that's why Jesus said, what king going out to encounter another king in war will not sit down first and deliberate whether he is able with 10,000 men to meet who comes against him with 20,000. And if not, while the other is a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace. It says, we cannot fight you. And so there's this posturing, there's this, we're trying to figure out a way of getting out of it, because back in those times when you lost 10,000 men, you were quite possibly losing 10,000 farmers, 10,000 city workers and steel makers and miners and marketers and any number of things, because they would fight during the hotter seasons and not during the winter. So you lose 10,000 people, you're not just losing 10,000, you are losing the productivity of 10,000 people. And so oftentimes it was worth just saying, okay, we'll be in your empire now. Because what that does is that preserves the 10,000 men, that preserves their families, that preserves their kids, that preserves the productivity. And their hope is at some later point that another army or themselves would happen, they'd be able to get free again. And so they tried to make that call. And so count the cost before it destroys you. Then he says in verse 33, verse 33, I think, is what ties together that whole hating yourself and hating others. It starts bringing that together into a conclusion, is what Luke is setting us up here for. And he says, therefore, any of you who does not renounce all that he has cannot be my disciple. Count the cost before you sign up as a Jesus follower. Now, I want us to really sit and meditate on this for a few minutes. Count the cost before you sign up as a Jesus follower. So therefore, anyone who does not renounce all that he has turns to that crowd and he tells them, until you can hate your family, until you can hate your wife, until you can hate your kids, until you can hate the safety and security that comes with those, until you can renounce that, single focused, follow me, and not a follower of mine. So I look at this and I'm trying to think through this myself because I'm like, well, I like my kids. I like my wife, I like my family, I like my brother. I mean, he annoys me, at times, but I like the guy. Is he wanting me to, break off all friendships and connections with, I don't think so. And so I've heard these passages and this thought is they go towards this idea like renouncing all that he has cannot be my disciple. I've heard these and other verses come together and say, well, you've got to be able to hate your own material possessions. You gotta be willing to give that up for Jesus. And so, and in our American society, this totally fits because we attach so much to what we can hold in our hands. And he started this parable getting us to think about finances and money, right? The king has to count the cost, or how much is this going to cost before he goes and builds himself a tower. And so he's already gotten this material possessions in our head. But then he shifts there in the next parable, in that next attachment, and he shifts and he goes, so what king now, when he goes to war, does not count the cost as well? Because when you go to war, it's not just impacting money, but it's impacting lives and livelihood, and it's impacting others. And so the king has to wrestle through, is this worth it for my people or not? And so it's a lot more than just material possessions. And then that question we have to ask is, are we willing to give up everything on behalf of Jesus? I was really I'm going to say some things here next that I think will be a little ooh. And they might go against what's normally being taught in, and I put quotes, Christian circles, but I think we should really try to wrestle this through and try to create the exact same shock value of what Jesus would have said to his followers. We've got to connect that in our own life. I mean, what's really the cost? What are we really renouncing when we claim we follow Jesus here in America? I mean, really? Because 65% of America claims some form of Christianity. Some form of it, whether it's Catholicism, Lutheranism, Baptist, evangelicalism, where it's even Mormonism and other ones that would claim some form of Jesus. That is a huge percentage. I mean, even in America, I think if we think about it, Christianity has such a huge impact and control over political parties as well. And just for the reality of what things are. What do you really have to renounce to be a Christian here? I mean, that's what I'm asking you, because I think it's going to look a little different for all of us. What are you renouncing? Because 65% of America following Jesus is a pretty 100 million people claims in some way to be following Jesus. And Jesus would, in turn, turn to that crowd and say, don't renounce all that you have. You cannot be a follower of mine. So what does that look like for a Christian in the United States of America? Because we enjoy tax-free property. We enjoy a lot of things. I'm glad. I'm glad. But at the same time, what are we renouncing to follow? What's the cost right now for an American Christian? Most of us haven't given up our riches and wealth to follow Jesus. Americans, by and large, are some of the richest people in the world. A salary of like $50,000 a year is more than like 80% of the entire world, if not even higher. I mean, we carry around smartphones and TVs, we have air conditioning, we have cars. We enjoy the perks of having lower gas prices than everybody else in the world. We enjoy the largest military. I mean, you go down the line. What does it cost American Christians to follow Jesus? What cost is there? I mean, really, and oftentimes it's taught, well, we gotta, renounce a lot of sin. Agree. We gotta renounce our sinful life and stop sinning. We gotta renounce it sort of gets harder. There is safety. So when Jesus bringing up family, whether we admit it or not, there is, in the family unit that existed during those times, there was safety and security. In the family, there was an inheritance guarantee. In the family line, there was a sense of stability. And so a lot of times families came together, very functioned as clans and tribes. There was a sense of stability there. It's different now. I mean, it's different in America than it was back then. Now there's a lot more, we can get by on just, family units there, just with, two and a kid. But back then, you had to stay connected because some of you, if you've ever tried farming work and stuff like that, that was more than just a two-person endeavor. You had to have teams and families, and your riches and your wealth were so attached to each other. And that is our sense of security in that. So when Jesus is saying, hey, I want you to renounce that sense of security, I want you to follow me. I think what I would be advocating for us here this morning is renouncing the safety of the 65% of Christianity in America. Begin to live a little bit different. Not one seeking power and control through politics, not one who lives in fear of what the enemy is going to bring, but one that, in the midst of it all, it's like, if they take away my job, so be it. If they take away my pay, so be it. If they take away my job, so be it. If they harass me week renounce the sin that I struggle with in my life, but at the same time, with a life of compassion and love as Jesus has commanded. And I want to renounce the safety and security of Christendom, American Christianity, and become a Jesus follower. Because I will say to the ground, American Christianity is not devoted to Jesus. It's devoted to power and control. American Christianity is a life of giving up and following. What have you given up to become a follower of Jesus? Because what Jesus is asking us to do is count that and be willing to do it, no matter what else goes on, no matter what else is happening. That's what he's asking us to do. But before we do it, we got to count that cost. Because Jesus doesn't want you to be surprised. I mean, this isn't an easy road. We've got to measure it, we've got to think, we've got to step out in faith. Let's pray. God, we thank you for your goodness. We thank you for these two parables. And counting the cost, thinking through renouncing our connections, our safety, our security net, and live a life completely devoted for you. Ugh. I'm gonna have to think about that. And I think you would agree. Good. Consider it. Think through it. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult. For God, to be a follower of Jesus, we have to renounce the safety and security that comes from our family units. We have to renounce the safety and security from sitting on the sidelines and enjoying our riches and wealth. We've got to be willing to give it up. That is a hard thing. But it's worth it. Guide us this week in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you so much for coming. I'll see you guys next week for a new parable.